I want to talk about these adventures, but I heard you say something that I wanted to talk about first, and that's the fact that for you, these aren't necessarily athletic endeavors, but this is more of an art form for you and more of a way for you to tell a story. And I thought that was really interesting. And I was wondering if you could kind of expand. Have you always had that philosophy when it came to some of your physical feats, or is it something that evolved over time?
It's been an evolution for me. I've been a professional athlete for a number of years, and all growing up, I was a swimmer and ultimately a collegiate swimmer in the United States. Nationally ranked athlete, professional triathlete, and now at least world records in the outdoors. And for many years of my life, most of my life, I think I've identified as myself as an athlete, a professional athlete, or elite athlete, or whatever you want to call that. And it was a few years ago that I kind of had a bit of a mindset shift. Ultimately, that kind of moment in time, at least I can place it in a moment, would be actually at Burning Man, which I imagine you're familiar with.
I'm familiar with that. I haven't been.
But highly recommend going. Burning Man, big art festival in the desert of Nevada, all sorts of different, things on display out there. But at its core, it's really about art and art installations. And for me, I never thought of myself as a creative. I always thought, I've always appreciated art, but wasn't like the biggest fan. I think, art's something you hang on your wall and you look at, and that's nice or whatever. But it wasn't, deeply fascinated by art in, I guess, the way that I framed it in my mind at that moment.
Plus in school, you're usually the athlete or the scientist,
exactly,
or the artist.
Exactly.
Right?
So I was athlete, and then I studied economics, so I was kind of more business driven. This kind of didn't, the word art didn't exactly, not that I had anything against it, just didn't how I personally identified. And, being out in the desert and seeing basically at Burning Man, there's all these huge art installations, basically these big art pieces, sculptures and things, but they're meant to be interacted with. You're actually about to, play on them or climb on them or swing from them, not just sit there and view them. And they're also ephemeral in the sense that most of them at the end of the week are burnt to the ground. And so there's, people may spend all year or years ultimately working on this big piece to have it there for a week and then just kind of it just disappears. And there was something about my experience being there and looking at these art pieces that I realized, like, what I'm doing in the world by doing these expeditions is my own personal creative artistic expression. And I started thinking of myself more as an artist. And yes, my canvas happens to be endurance sports or breaking world records in the outdoors or what that is. But through storytelling and ultimately the ripple effect of positivity and inspiration that can be, raised from that storytelling, that is ultimately the art. And so for me, it has become less and less about being the man in the arena, like, hey, watch me break this world record because I'm awesome. Like, that's really pretty simple, and could care less about that. It's like, hey, I'm curious about pushing the limits of human potential in interesting and unique ways. And I share that with the world, not so I can get pat on the back or have my name on, newspaper or something like that, but it's so that other people can watch that and take that into their own lives. So my best piece of feedback that I receive from people that, write to me on Instagram or send me notes or emails or whatever that is not like, wow, Colin, your world record project in Antarctica was extraordinary. People said it was impossible and you did this amazing thing. It's, I watch that every single day through your social media, and now I'm starting that business that I always thought I couldn't start, or I'm taking this leap of faith in my relationship and diving in deeper with love, or I'm creating whatever that is, or I'm going through this incredibly hard time. My mother was just diagnosed with cancer and I'm really struggling, but you've given me the strength to persevere in the face of really tough tragedy in my personal life, whatever it is. That to me is what I try to put out in the world, and ultimately what I think we can all do as humans by sharing our stories and having that sort of resonant positivity. And so for me, because of that, I've reframed what I do, to be more of an artist than just a pure athlete.
Right, which means the story is as important as the feat to a certain extent.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that it's the way in which that we can share and learn from one another. Certainly my, athletic accomplishments, what I just did in Antarctica, the first person to cross Antarctica solo, unsupported and unaided, the first word in that is solo, alone. I was out there alone in Antarctica for 1,000 miles pulling a 375-pound sled. Many people have attempted that over time. No one had been successful until I did it. But the word solo in some sense is a misnomer because yes, I was completely solo. I wasn't aided by anybody else. But me being there was a, addition of all of these different experiences and inspirations and other people's stories that I had, brought to inside of myself to be there. And so to your point about sort of the story is greater than the feat is like, yes, like I'm a component of all of the other people's stories that came before me. I have great deference and reverence for the 100 years of history and polar exploration. And I've written some things that I posted on Instagram and stuff like that called "Standing on the Shoulders of Giants," which is people like, wow, you finally cracked this impossible code and you made this crossing of Antarctica. And I was like, yes, I did, but I did so because of the people that came before me and their attempts and their daring and their just these extraordinary things that people have done. And so I think that that's true of wherever you are, whatever sort of your medium is in life, is that you've learned from others, you've been inspired from others along the way. And as humans, I think we almost have a responsibility to share our stories, not again so we can beat our chest and say, hey, look at me, but for the opposite, which is you never know the impact you're having in a positive way on others and their other people's growth, because that's certainly been my path in observing others and learning from other people.